What's up, y'all? Y'all are listening to Living Corporate's flagship podcast. If you didn't know, Living Corporate helps organizations build employee engagement and market trust through data analytics and data transformation, our e-learning platform, and brand marketing storytelling. We're so excited for you to be here today. The conversation you're about to hear is going to connect the dots between employee experience and go-to-market effectiveness. If you're not ready, get ready. Here we go. Alfred Edmond, senior executive, speaker, leader, swole brother, elder of Black Enterprise. Mr. Edmond, how are you doing, sir?
Zach, it is great to be back on your show. It's been a minute, and I'm doing very well.
Let me tell you a personal flex I have, man. When you called me to ask, when you just called me to check in and talk to me, I said, dang, so the editor of Black Enterprise has my number and calls me, and I'm on a first name basis. I don't call you by your first name, but you called. But you're saying you called. It's I want to say I appreciate our relationship. I appreciate your willingness and interest in reaching back and helping and lifting as you've continued to climb and do your thing. Right. It's interesting to see. The last time you were on Living Corporate, we talked about. I remember reading Black Enterprise and just seeing this was like in the 90s. I was a little kid me and my mom come from a single parent household. So my mom, I would go to the hair because when mom getting her hair done in the 90s, she was there all day. Right. So I was in the hair salon all day. And I remember seeing the magazines stretched out, and I would see Jet, and I would see Ebony, and I would see Black Enterprise. And I remember seeing people that looked like me wearing suits, and I was just like, man, what is that? What is that like? Seeing these people just it seems like universes away, and yet it wasn't, because it was in my hand. And so what I appreciate about all of my engagements, interactions with you is you bring that to life in our interactions. When I talk to you, I don't feel like I'm talking to someone who is distant and running off to Martha's Vineyard to just kind of sneer at other Black folks. I see someone who's really a part of the people. So I just want to give you your flowers in front of you while you can smell them. No day is promised. I just want to say, man, I appreciate you.
Well, I'm going to say back at you. I'm going to say likewise. There's a very real reason why we connect like that. Because one, I came from the same background you did. I was raised by a single mother. I was sitting in barbershops and salons, looking at Black Enterprise and Ebony and Jet, and seeing people who are doing things that I couldn't see in my immediate surroundings, in my upbringing. I come from a hardworking family, a faith-filled family, but mostly nurses and military people. Good livings, honest livings, but they weren't wearing suits and ties to work. They weren't executives. They weren't MBAs. They weren't PhDs. And so you're right. Black Enterprise and Black media in general gave us windows into worlds. And that old saying, if you don't see it, it's hard to be it. And the things I imagined that I could do for myself that my mother really couldn't imagine for me, really. Black Enterprise did that for me just like it did it for you. And the other thing I would say, Zach, and I absolutely appreciate your respect and reverence for me as an elder, as someone who's a couple of generations ahead of you. But lifting happens in two different ways. Yes, you could say Black Enterprise lifts you up, but I could say you in Living Corporate lifts Black Enterprise up, because as I tell people like you, we're in the same mission. We're on the same mission, and you're ground troops. There are things that you do on the ground with your podcast, with the audiences that you reach, that a larger media company that's national and does major events can't do. And so, yes, there's some lifting in terms of us, quote unquote, pulling you up and bringing you into the spotlight. But there's another more important kind of lifting, in that if you're not doing what you're doing on the ground with your podcast, with the audiences you speak to, we can't be lifted up. Black Enterprise becomes somewhat irrelevant. if there's not people on the ground like you doing what you do. So, we're just different branches of the same military, man. Doing what we do.
It's that perspective, because there's so much insight and wisdom, even in recognizing and appreciating like the nature of media in 2025. Because you're right, like, I think there was like this pivot or this perspective, or there was like this attitude, kind of when new technology started sprouting up, people started kind of like thumbing their nose at like legacy content, right? So like I remember when podcasting was new and streaming was new, or like kind of like coming in vogue, then there was like, oh, radio's dead. And it's like, no, radio is not dead. Radio is not gonna die, right? When the blogging era came to be, and like, which has been around for a couple of decades now, but as it continues to grow in popularity, and like kind of like the magazine blog now, which is a different thing than like legacy print media, came into be, then it was like, oh, a print magazine is dead. It's like, no, they're legacy media. They're always going to be there. But to your point, the efficacy of those pillars and how rusty they get over time, it will be dependent upon how they recognize themselves in an ever-changing landscape. And so I respect and appreciate, I think that's brilliant and accurate analysis, that just because there's a platform that is niche, or that is more targeted, or that frankly just is not global, doesn't mean it does not have a different type of impact that punches above its weight. And just because there's a platform or media, like I said, is global, doesn't mean that it is somehow too far away to touch or reach anybody. So I love it. And you're absolutely right. Two branches of the same military. I thought you were going to say two branches of maybe the same tree, but I agree with you 100%.
No, I'm someone, fortunately, I did not. I say fortunately now. I didn't say it when I was an undergrad, but I didn't come to the traditional journalism route. So my degree is actually in art. Most people don't know that. And so I never got into the demagoguery of newspapers and magazines and radio and these things are real journalism and other things are not journalism. I'm what our CEO, Rich Graves, calls me media agnostic, media neutral. You give me the weapon, I don't care how it gets done. And so when people sneer at podcasts or before that blogging, like that's not real media, that's wrong. That's incorrect. It's also wrong just to look at new media to sneer at traditional media. See, my thing is, once upon a time, there were Black newspapers punching above their weight, serving very localized communities. And that is still a role for that. So my thing is, we get caught up in how we do things when it's really about why we do things. And Black media. And so even when people say, Black-owned media is dead because Ebony is gone and Jet is gone and Black Enterprise and Essence are digital. And I'm like, no, Black media is living corporate. Black media is What's Your Revolution. I can name all the different. Black media is Roland Martin. Black media. So we're getting caught up in the methodology and saying, oh, Black press or Black media is dead. No, it has evolved. Just like music didn't die because we're not buying vinyl records anymore. And so I think we could be very narrow-minded, and I'll say I'm a baby boomer, about, the way things used to be. Well, guess what? You are reaching people more effectively with a podcast than we did with a national magazine when we were a print magazine. And that's why now we're doing video podcasts and other digital media, because it's about how do you serve and reach the audience. It doesn't have to be print on paper. You use whatever means is necessary, as Malcolm X said. No,
you're absolutely right. You said something earlier about being on the ground, right? And man, like I look at this landscape, Mr. Edmond, and I'm just like, I just, look, I think I have the blessing and curse of being a little younger, right? I'm not gonna say I'm young because I'm 36, but I'm youngish, I would say, right? And like, we're in this season where even rich white men are getting punished for saying anything against the current administration, which for me signals like, well, doggone, okay, if Jimmy Kimmel can get in trouble, if Stephen Colbert can get in trouble, and they not telling jokes like, they're not even really joking for real, and yet look at the response. Here we are. Like, what does that mean? Because they always say, like, if white America gets a cough, Black America gets a cold. If white America gets a cold, Black folks are getting pneumonia, right? Like, I think about Black enterprise. I think about, again, kind of talking about how I first engaged with y'all and understood y'all's brand, and I think about, like, y'all represent to me the Black corporate experience, right? You think about Black enterprise, I think about Black folks at work, right? What, in your mind, what concerns or thoughts do you have about Black folks at work? And I mean at all levels, not even just the senior executive, but just all levels, how they're navigating the world of work in an increasingly totalitarian American context. Like, what is that? What concerns, if any, does that bring for you?
Oh, no, there's huge concerns. The environment that we're operating in as a company, as a Black company that actually says Black in its name, is not to be overlooked. And more importantly, to your point, when we're talking about Black people in corporate America, and maybe even more so Black professionals in government, as we've seen the move to so-called downsized government, but the downsizing is without regard to actual job performance. We used to rely as Black people that if we excelled at our work, if we made our performance just unassailable, excellence is the best response. That was the idea. The idea excellence could protect you. Well, I don't think it's going to last. Let me say that as a spirit of hope. But right now we're at a space where even excellence won't protect you. Even excellence will be seen as, no, I don't care. You don't think the way we do. You don't look the way we do. Therefore, your excellence is now disregarded. And therefore, you can be let go. You can be fired summarily without really cause. Just because I have the power to fire you, I will do that. And you're right. I don't think the space is going to last because I don't think it's sustainable. And I think we've seen throughout history, we've had this pendulum swing in this direction before. It didn't end because suddenly people gained the conscious. It ended because it became unsustainable. And the bottom line is, when all is said and done, excellence is excellence, and excellence will out. So in the short run, yes, you got, I'll say specifically Black executives and professionals in corporate America are like, man, just even being the best at what I do may not be enough to protect me. But the flip side is, being the best at what I do, there's nothing to gain with being less than the best. So you got to trust your excellence in the long run, even though in the current environment, it may not protect you in the short run. But I think it is part of the unsustainability is the fact that Jimmy Kimmel will pay the same price as a Black person, if you will. And again, that is unsustainable. The country can't grow, can't evolve, can't advance in an increasingly competitive world if you're really going to undercut your best and brightest in the name of a short-term agenda. And that doesn't necessarily make you feel good today, but part of being Black in America is knowing what we've been through already, other periods of hopelessness, and the fact that I'm doing what I do, at Black Enterprise. I have been doing, like we talked about our beginnings. You didn't know when you were 11 years old or 9 years old sitting in a salon that one day you'd be doing this someday. And that's evidence of the faith of your parents and their parents and their parents, who couldn't have imagined what we do for a living. It's weird to say this, but getting fired from a senior VP job at a Fortune 500 company is progress. Are you kidding?
Man.
My mother didn't even know what it looked like to even walk through the doors of a company like that. So yes, we're experiencing short-term setbacks, but they're short-term setbacks from much higher mountains than previous generations could even imagine.
That perspective is powerful, right? So I think about, like, to that point, I think about my grandfather, who's still with us, my father's father, Leslie Nunn. Hey, Papa, I love you. We were talking one day. So for context, my grandfather is 84, and so he grew up. He had an elementary school education. He was a sharecropper picking cotton in Mississippi. He left in his early 20s to then move to Rock Island. He integrated he with his wife, my grandmother, they integrated their neighborhood. They were the first black family there. They faced death threats from the local community. He had to teach my dad and his brothers how to shoot guns just in case someone tried to run in their house. My grandmother kept a machete by the door. And all that with his elementary school education, he worked at John Deere for like 30 plus years, then retired and got into real estate. But then my dad and my uncle still taught him how to read. And so when I talked to him 5 years ago, no, not 5 years ago, my gosh, 7 years ago, when I built Living Corporate, and I explained to him what it was about. And he said, I recognize things are tough, son, but it's better than it was. I said, I hear you. He's like, I can't imagine. And this was, at this point, I think I was still working. I was in consulting. I was working at Accenture or PwC or something. I was working somewhere. So I had a 6-figure job. And he said, I couldn't imagine. He said, there's never a dad would have imagined making the kind of money you make and you just sitting at the house all day. He said, you don't even go outside.
And that's without regard to education level, because people, again, I'm a historian in general and a black business historian in particular. Your grandfather could have had a Harvard MBA, because there were a few men in his generation that did. Still couldn't get a job. You could maybe get a job as a janitor in a major corporation with an MBA from an Ivy League school. I mean, look at people like H. Naylor Fitzhugh. I can drop some names. You guys can Google them. But these are early black men of your grandfather's generation who had all the credentials and everything, but still would have been like, nope, but you're not getting a job here. I got a similar story to yours. When I first got hired at Black Enterprise, which was huge, of course, for my family. All they knew was I was working at Black Enterprise. I was a junior editor. And my first feature assignment was a cover story on Carl Ware and Chuck Morrison, who were high-level black executives of Coca-Cola in the late 80s. This was after the whole New Coke, and Pepsi wars and all that whole fiasco. And they were the two black executives that were part of the marketing effort to recover from the whole New Coke thing. And I got assigned to feature them in my first feature story for Black Enterprise. Well, my grandparents, who were living in New Jersey where I was raised when I was growing up, they had retired to Georgia. So I had to go to Atlanta, and it was like, this is a chance to go visit my grandparents while I'm down there. And I'll try to speed up the story. When they were driving me from Gainesville, Georgia, back to Atlanta to catch my flight back home, you could see my grandmother kind of getting like permission, unspoken permission from my grandfather to tell me something. And now my grandfather was a very prominent Baptist minister in New Jersey. He was still part of the ministerial staff in the town that they retired to. Very well known, very prominent. But the educated person in the family was my grandmother, who was a nurse. Nursing runs on my father's side of the family among the women. So they're driving me back, and they pretty much explained to me they weren't making such a big deal out of me just because their grandson was working at Black Enterprise and was doing these great things. That's when they revealed to me my grandfather had been functionally illiterate up until when they retired to Georgia. She was the one that was coaxing him and helping him prepare his sermons and do these things, because she was the educated one. And their thing was, and when they retired to Georgia, he swallowed his pride and actually learned to read in a program that was really for high school kids. So you imagine somebody in there, by then he had to be in his 80s, but deciding, no, I am going to learn to read. I'm not going to worry about, I'm older than these people. I'm not going to have my pride be in my way. So she was expressing pride in what he did, but also that in less than 2 generations, we went from a functionally illiterate, like you said, like your grandfather's generation, older man. My grandfather lived to be 98. He died just before Barack Obama got the nomination. So he got to see that. He was born in 1910. And then they're looking at their grandson, who is a editor at a national magazine. They didn't live to see me become editor in chief, but they got to see me on the masthead. And so it's important for us to draw on those stories, because we got to realize this nation is not really more than a generation and a half from slavery. It's not a generation from Jim Crow. It's not a generation from So you could say, oh, things are horrible. Like you say, grandfather said, yeah, things are rough. But when you think about how far we've come since really
Yeah.
1940, my mother was born in
Yeah.
1940, the mere fact that we're having these problems and debates, we're having these problems and debates with Black people on the
Yeah.
Supreme Court.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? We're talking about, where are, what's happening to Black men and Black women in the senior levels of corporate America. But the fact that we're having that debate says,
There's been something,
what are we
there's been
talking about?
significant progress. And I think, and that's what,
In a short period of time.
And I think like so often, and like I know I'm guilty of this. I believe that like with youth comes a lot of really positive things. It gets energy and passion and even some resilience, right? But with youth also comes, just by the very nature of it, a lack of perspective, and a lack of like appreciating historical context because you just weren't here. So like it's really easy to fall into deep cynicism and lose hope because you could say, well, go ahead, go.
That's our job, but I'm saying if you're a Gen X or older, just what I just shared with you, we're sharing now. It's important for us to have these intergenerational conversations so you gain that perspective. But let me tell you something that your generation and younger should not give up. There are things that my generation and older accepted that you won't accept.
It's true.
Like I'm with that when y'all say, no, this ain't my dad. This is not my grandmother. you come at me, you know what I'm saying? There's a certain price to be paid for that attitude. But you earned that saying, no, we're not even just, you're not here to survive. Right. We're here to thrive. You get to thrive, we get to thrive. For my parents' generation and my grandparents, they were just trying to survive so we would have a chance. Well, now that you have that chance, I'm with the attitude of younger generations that's saying, this ain't 1955. You may want to go back to that, but you're not going to get the same response that you got before.
100%. And I think to your point about this intergenerational relationship and support, it's, to your point, Gen X and baby boomers, like so there's a beautiful dance there, right? Because yes, we have the energy and the rigor and the all these things, right? Passion. And yes, we also have it ain't gonna be that though. And so then what we need from the Gen Xers and the baby boomers is when we say it ain't gonna be that though, then we need the eldership support of, hey, no, it's not gonna be that. Like you, right? And so then we all come together, right? So then we're listening and appreciating context and perspective, because I think it's dismissive. And I can say this, right? And it's important. I think it's important to have this conversation for real, because it's dismissive, I think, Mr. Edmond, to say, well, functionally, nothing has changed. We're just as fascist now as we were. And it's like, okay, if you were to talk to somebody, if you are blessed enough to have your grandparents, or by the grace of God, your great grandparents around, and you ask them what their life was like, and you ask them what their opportunities were, and you ask them like what access to things that they had, you might be surprised that, like, yes, on paper, you can make these arguments about policy and this, we're talking about talking to real living people about their real experiences. I think you would be really surprised that things are genuinely different, right? That doesn't mean that we don't have a long way to go. That does not mean that we should be satisfied. That does not mean any of that. But I can tell you that I'm not getting phone calls at 3:00 in the morning from my neighbors threatening to kill me and my children. Like, I'm not, my wife doesn't have machetes by the door just in case someone wants to come to the door and attack our family. And so, like,
I had a similar conversation with, I interviewed Jane Kennedy because, she just dropped a new book, Plain Jane. I interviewed her for my Beyond the Hype series. And she talked about, and again, Jane Kennedy is only 73. Again, she's still baby boomer, but she's older baby boomer, right? You talked about her mother, like you talked about the machete. She never went anywhere without a knife because anybody could be trying to get her. She's like, even a bus driver could be, you know what I'm saying? People I live in a wonderful neighborhood in New Jersey, a suburb of Newark, racially mixed, politically diverse. There's some MAGA
Mm-hmm.
people in my neighborhood, but I ain't got to worry about when I'm walking down the street. I'm not worried about nothing
Right.
jumps off. And for us, that's a win because just basic security in your home and in your neighborhood and going back and forth to work was something that our parents and grandparents couldn't take for granted because you could disappear in the middle of the night. Your house could be, like you said, you kept guns by the door, you kept knives around the house, your kids knew what to do. Now, if this happens,
Right.
this is how you escape.
Yeah.
This is where you go. This is where
Right.
you don't go. This, and so you're right. This intergenerational sharing is not to trivialize what we're going through today. You're right. It's not like we're done. But we need to draw hope from the fact that we have made steady progress, even with these backlashes, because these backlashes come depending on who's counting, every 12 to 15 years. You had Reconstruction, you talk about the backlash every step of the way. That doesn't mean we should dismiss it. That doesn't mean we should trivialize it. But our biggest strength as Black people is all we got to do is look over our shoulder and be like, you know what? It may be rough. We're going to take some casualties because we all, every generation does. But the arc of, what is it? The arc of the universe bends toward justice.
Absolutely.
That's what Dr. King says. And I haven't seen anything that says that in the long run, and I'm trying to be, I don't want to be Pollyannish about it. Is that how you say it? I don't want to be overly rose-colored glasses. The things that we're dealing with, the things that I'm looking at, my children are your age. So my youngest is your age. The stuff they're going through as professionals, as entrepreneurs, the things that they may face in the near future. And then I was just looking at some Gen Z, and I'm not just talking about Black Gen Z, I'm talking about Gen Z period. We like to dismiss, they don't like working. And this is a generation that missed a whole season of socialization because they came into adulthood during COVID. We complain that they don't know how to talk and communicate. Where were they supposed to learn that when they were isolated for 4 years in junior high school? And then they came in where there's no wage growth and the entry-level jobs that you and I and every other generation of young people could count on is being eliminated by AI already. Like, there's no entry point if you're just starting out. If you don't have skills coming into the game, there's no rookie camp. And then we wonder why Gen Z is so anxious and so overwhelmed, and why can't they do it the way we did it? I graduated from college during the Depression. I still was able to find a job. It wasn't the job I wanted, but I didn't care about actually getting a job.
It's different now.
And now you got a generation of Gen Zers who are better educated, by the way. They're better educated, and they're less able to get their careers even started. And let's not get into what it takes to buy a home, what it takes to get like the starting blocks of. And so all that to say, I'm biased because I'm heavily into mentorship. So part of what keeps me relevant is most of the people I talk to on a day-to-day basis are a generation ahead of you, your generation or younger. And so I'm not with that whole Gen Z is a mess and Gen Z, why can't they? When I'm like, look at what the cards they've been dealt. And what's our job? Our job is to help them navigate. I'm talking as Black people in particular. Our job is to help them navigate their current environment using the resources and the history and the perspectives that we have. Help them to apply that. You saying they don't know how to talk? Take them out and talk to them. Have conversations. Coach them up in what they need to be able to do to not only survive, because survival is not an acceptable standard anymore. That was an acceptable standard for my parents and their parents, your grandparents. We deserve to thrive, but we're not going to thrive if we're expecting the world to let us. Power concedes nothing without a demand. That's still true. So we have to demand to thrive, and we're being reminded that freedom ain't free.
Right.
Even today, that rights don't just stay your rights if you don't fight for them, if you don't defend them, and that sometimes you're going to have to get up and push back. And what I appreciate about Gen Z, and even a little older than Gen Z, is the willingness to push back and say, call me selfish, call me self-centered, call me whatever you want, but I want things. I want to enjoy life. I want to have opportunities. I want to do things. And I'm not here for the wait your turn. I'm not here for the, And I'm speaking as someone who's blocking in some ways because the other challenge is that older Americans like me
Yeah.
are still working, in part because of choice, in part because we have no
Yeah.
choice. So Gen Z is competing with 4 other generations. When I came out of school, I only compete maybe with 2.
You know, there's something to be said. Like, before we move, I want to say that I think that what people don't appreciate about progress and like fighting for your rights is you can't just fight for keeping what you have. You need to fight to thrive in an increasing fashion. Not because you're going to get all the things that you fight for, but that's actually just so you can stay where you're at. If you try to fight for just where you're at, well, the larger institutions are going to erode away at that. So you're going to look up and you've been trying to push to stay in place. You're going to realize that you've been pushed back. But if you instead push and say, actually, we do need remote only options. Actually, we do need healthcare, and we need paid time off. We need maternity leave, paternity. We need all these things that these other developed countries have. We need all of that, and we need free college, and so then what happens is, for the people who haven't had any of that, they go, all right, look, y'all doing a little too much. But the reality is that the people who are pushing for that, they gonna push for, like, because the black civil rights, to your point about its history, you know that the Civil Rights Act passed in 1964, 1968, it had way more provisions in it. It had way more provisions in it. And then it got shrunk down and negotiated down to what it eventually was. But imagine if they had started with what we have, then we would have had even less. So it's about it's about recognizing and appreciating those voices. And even when you feel like they're pushing for things that you can't relate to, or that you think are too much or are too whatever, appreciate the fact that, one, let them shoot for the moon and land on the stars. But what if they shoot for the moon and land there? Like, there's nothing wrong with that, right?
Well, here's the other thing that speaks to your point about quote unquote overshooting. The biggest lesson I learned from my parents too, my mother in particular, but my grandparents, and I've been blessed over the last 15 years to learn more about even their parents, which is hard to find, but about the lives they led. They didn't fight. The fighting they did was not for themselves. My grandfather had no idea what corporate America looked like. My grandfather had no idea what it would mean to be a national media executive. You know what I'm saying? That wasn't even within the realm of their imagination. They were fighting for things that was like saying, I'm fighting to get my kid to be on the moon. You know what I'm saying? It's this capacity to fight for future generations to be able to live in worlds that you will never, ever, ever see. And so it's not only important for us to shoot beyond the goal, like you said, it's also important to shoot beyond our own experience, our own lifetime, meaning be willing to lose a battle in this lifetime to win battles for your kids and their kids in the future, because that's what our parents did. Zach, I remember, I'm not somebody who cries a lot, but I will boohoo at a movie if I'm moved, right? And the mother of my 3 older children, I've been married multiple times, but my first wife is still one of my closest friends. We were still together then, and we went to see the movie Glory, right? And I don't know if you remember toward the end, you see this mass grave of Denzel, and I forgot the white dude that played his superior officer, but they're all thrown in the same grave. White Union soldiers and black soldiers, and they're just burying them in this mass grave, no markings, whatever. And I'm boohooing, bro. Like, again, the mother of my children's name is Ruth. Ruth had to literally, she left me in the theater and went out to the lobby. It's like, I'll be out here when you're done, bro. Because and I'm there for 20 minutes. Wow. I promise you, tears rolling down. And here's what it hit me. Those people, and I don't mean just the black ones, but obviously the black people was ones that was emotionally connected to me because they were slaves and you were fighting for their own freedom. They were buried never knowing what the outcome of the war was. I mean, if you're a student of the Civil War, it wasn't clear who was going to win until almost the very end. There were some key battles at the very end that swung it. So you're talking about people that went to their graves, and for all they know, nothing changed in their favor. But they were still willing to go to their graves. And I remind myself that I can't fight for the right thing with some kind of guarantee or reassurance that I will win. I got to fight for the right thing because it is the right thing. And I got to be okay with, I lost, I got fired. This black high level executive in government got let go for unfair reasons. Or they took the slavery exhibit out of the Smithsonian. All those things that hurt us and are losses that we're taking in this current environment. We gotta be like, no, but I'm willing to take that loss because I'm not just fighting for what's happening in the current environment. I'm fighting with this belief that it's the right thing to fight for. And if the one, I won't even say criticism. I won't say criticism. One of the things that we have to instill in younger generations is the willingness to fight and know you may lose in the current environment. But there's a battle that goes beyond you, that goes to your children and their children that will look back the way we look back on our grandparents and realize they knew they were never going. There were some grandparents or people that knew they were never going to drink from a whites only water fountain. That they were, that their lives were not really going to appreciably change. Yet they still put their lives on the line, their jobs on the line, their livelihoods on the line. They got ran out of towns. Yeah. Because they knew that someday Alfred Edmond Jr. and Zach Nunn would be sitting in places having these types of conversations about things that they couldn't even imagine.
Your point about not just surviving but thriving, and then I think about excelling, right? Which then has me thinking about Black Men Excel, right? I mean, first of all, again, we had already talked about this off mic, man. If it wasn't for these twins, I'd be up there, right? But I remember the first time I got introduced to Black Men Excel, I was a virtual facilitator for an incredible panel. I'd love to learn more about, or rather, I'd love to hear more, you tell our audience more about the history behind Black Men Excel, the purpose and the mission, especially this year, right? With everything happening. Right. And also not to be a downer or a doomer, but what it looks like is going to continue to happen as we look at 2026 and head into midterms. Talk to us about Black Men Excel. Like, I would just love to hear you share more about the story, the mission, and the purpose.
Okay, I'll try to do a relatively short version. First, let me start off with what Black Enterprise is about. It is about excellence. Yes, in the age of social media, we're talking about Black excellence. But excellence, if you achieve excellence in general, the Black takes care of itself. And I'll tell you, when I got named editor-in-chief of the magazine, our late, great founder, Earl Graves Sr., who passed away during the pandemic, we still haven't totally recovered from that. But we're still driven by his vision. And when he promoted me to editor-in-chief of Black Enterprise magazine, he brought me to his home in Sag Harbor for lunch to have a talk with me. And he said to me, I want to be clear with you. I'm not expecting you to have the best Black magazine. I'm not expecting you to create the best business magazine. I want this to be the best magazine, period. Measure yourself against the Vogues and the L's and he was like naming magazines, all the top Sports Illustrated at the time, because if you do that, best Black, best business, all the subcategories take care of themselves. I'm going to fast forward. Yes, the precursor to the what is now called the XCEL Summit of Men, XCEL Summit for Men, but began as Black Men Excel now 9 years ago, was this idea that Black male excellence was excellence, period. That we're not just excellence for ourselves and for Black families and Black communities, that our excellence permeates every area of achievement, and certainly beyond sports and entertainment. You look at the area, there are Black people and Black men in particular who are contributing excellence. Yes, it's Black excellence because they're Black, but the operative word is excellence. So what Black Men Excel, which is now the XCEL Summit of Men, has evolved to, coming out of the pandemic, really was, we realized we had the Women of Power Summit, which is in its 20th year next year, which is for Black women in corporate America. But there was nothing that celebrated, championed, and acknowledged the excellence that Black men bring to corporate America, right? There's lots of great programs and efforts for entrepreneurs, regardless of gender. But we're like, who is the only group of people in business that there's no dedicated effort? And then we realize there's actually nothing that celebrates excellence in black men if you're not an entertainer or an athlete. Think about it. You got the ESPY awards, but if you're just excelling in your profession in general, there's nothing. And that's when we create the XCEL Awards. So to fast forward to where we are now, this is an event for iron to sharpen iron. This is an event for professional men to come together and say, what does it take to get to the C-suite in corporate America? How do I negotiate my salary when I come from a generation that making six figures is already beyond anything they imagine? So I know six figures is more than my mother ever thought about making, but I know I'm getting paid 50% less than my peers because I didn't know what to ask for. How do I understand P&L management so that I know that I'm not going to get a divisional VP role if I can't manage P&L on a corporate or even global level? So it's coming together to say we're going to do specialized professional development so that these attendees of this conference can deliver excellence. Because if they deliver excellence at FedEx, if they deliver excellence at JP Morgan Chase, if they deliver excellence, the black part will take care of itself. And my point about excellence, we talked about it earlier, is when all is said and done, whether the playing field is level or not, whether it's fair or not, what is the most amazing thing about us? We win when the playing field is not level. We excel. We set new standards of performance when the playing field is not level. That doesn't mean we should accept the unfairness, but we also have a tradition of saying, we perform in spite of. We will perform in spite of, and you will eventually come around to our way. And I'm going to speak to my role model coming into the greatest graduate ever of my university, Rutgers University. Paul Robeson, right? Paul Robeson was an All-American athlete in 4 sports.
Genius.
Lawyer, actor, singer, global leader of social movements. But I remember that when he played football for his own team, they were stepping on his feet. On his hands. You know what I'm saying? His teammates. What made them change? He was so good. They were like, wait, we can win this with this brother. Wait, what? Maybe we should hold back to racism a little bit so we can win. And the thing about America, and maybe true for Western culture in general, but America in particular, this is for all of us, regardless of race, we like to win.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Jackie Robinson got to Major League Baseball and other black players because it was like, no, we can win. We can win. And so our thing is, yes, the playing field is not level and it's less level this year than it was last year for obvious reasons, right? But excellence will out. And what we do at the XCEL Summit for Men and non-black men attend now because just like with Women of Power, non-black women attend Women of Power because they're like, it may have been created for black women, but what they're teaching here, what I'm getting here, the relationships I'm building here is helping me to do even better.
Right.
Because excellence wills out. You don't care if the surgeon is going to save your life. You're not thinking about their race and gender until after the surgery is over, if at all. Suddenly, their competence and their excellence is more important than these other things that swing the pendulum of economic and political.
So there's 2 things here. One, I want to say, what I love about your definition of black excellence is, well, let me start with this. What I love is black excellence, as you describe it, is showing up and doing well. It's doing your best. It's putting your best forward. It's quality. It's intention. It's performing in spite of, and it's delivering in spite of. My challenge so often, and I love what I did not hear you say, is I think we're in the season, Mr. Edmond, where we're calling certain things black excellence. So where it's like, is that black excellence or is that just exploiting for capital, right? So if I decide to go back to my old poor community and build 5 liquor stores, is that black excellence because I made money, right? Or if I decide to exploit someone in the name of, again, getting rich, that's not. And so I was just having a conversation with someone yesterday and I was like, listen, you don't have to, black excellence isn't about being absurdly wealthy. I said my grandfather was black excellence before my black grandfather was black excellence when he was sharecropping. My grandmother was black excellence when she was trying to figure out how to make the food stretch to feed her family. My mother was black excellence when she graduated and was Miss Tougaloo. My father was black excellence and practicing black excellence when he was just trying to put it all together. Like black excellence isn't just this. It's not. It's. I believe that black excellence is shown at its most true and honest when it is about doing the very best you can with what you have, in spite of your circumstance, and serving and helping other people with your gifts and your talents. Paul Robeson is a phenomenal example of black excellence. Paul Robeson was everything. Like I remember I learned about Paul Robeson when I was in 8th grade, and I was just so flabbergasted. Like this person is like a superhero. Like he was so ahead of his time in so many ways. They called him all sorts of things. They had to politically malign him, and almost tried to turn him into a hermit because he was unassailable. Like he was just so excellent. He was so cold at everything.
Well, I want to hit on the third thing. You talked about the excellence is doing your best. Excellence is performing despite. But that last thing you said is the most important thing, which Paul Robeson represents, which our founder Earl Graves talked about all the time. It's not excellence. It's the only person that benefits from your performance is you. That's not excellence. It's a lot of good things, but it's not excellence. True excellence is that whatever you do creates a multi-generational positive impact. That's when you talk about what your grandparents and your parents did that in their lifetimes was not necessarily considered excellence the way we measure it today, but because it created a platform of values and multi-generational performance that allows you to do what you do. Listen, I'm one of the best I know at what I do, right? And everything I do, if I put my time into it, I know I'm going to end up being great at it. Because my mother taught me not being the best at any given time is not a reason not to do your best. So I'm not excellent because I'm going to get a bunch of likes on Instagram. Excellence is what I do. I don't have a B game. I don't have a C game. I have an A game. That's the game I got. Sometimes it wins, sometimes it doesn't, but it's never less than my A game. That's a legacy of my mother and my father and my grandparents, and I can go back. And so that's certainly what got reinforced in my now almost 39 years at Black Enterprise. That's what Earl Graves poured into us. It reinforced what I already came in with. And so what I'm saying is, if all you do is succeed in your own life, and yeah, you got a fly car and a fly house and a nice job and a status, 6-7-figure income or whatever you want to call it, but has no impact beyond that, that ain't excellence. Fame is not excellence. Money's not excellence unless that money is being invested in a way that brings a return on investment that goes beyond you. And in the age of social media, we do get caught up, but I don't think we're more caught up than anybody else in this idea of looking like we're balling and looking like we got it like that and looking. And I'm always like, don't talk to me about influence. When you tell me you're an influencer, I yawn. Show me impact. I look for people with impact. The reason I'm connected to you, Zach, you know how many people want to get on the XCEL stage at the XCEL Summit for men or women? And I'm like, you look at all my followers, and I'm like, yeah, but where's the impact? Excellence is about impact, positive impact. When you talk about the things your mother did and your father did and your grandfather did, it delivered impact that is still being felt today. And that's what we celebrate at Black Enterprise. We're not impressed with celebrity. We're not impressed with how many followers you got on Instagram. We're not impressed with just being a popular speaker just because you're a popular speaker, because we know people with 10,000 followers who have a lot more impact than people with 1 million followers.
That's a fact.
We get confused about what real power is. I did this post, but we don't have time to talk about it on the show here. I'm going to send you a link. It was called Who's Bad? All right. And I did a ranking of powerful, influential, famous, and who fits in those categories. And when you realize that many of the people we think of as powerful aren't powerful at all.
No.
They're just visible, they're famous, they're well known, but they can't do anything to improve your life.
When we have our next conversation, speaking that, when we have our next conversation, we got to talk about that, because there's a huge conflation between visibility and power, right? Like, oh, you see this person on this TV show or on the red carpet, so you think that they can like help you with. No, like some of the most powerful people, or people creating most power, they're in rooms that you may not even know about, right? Like, it's a whole another conversation. But anyway, Mr. Edmond, the event is the XCEL Summit for Men 2025. The Black Men XCEL Summit for Men takes place October 15th to the 17th at the Hyatt Regency Grand Cypress, Orlando. I'm gonna put the link in the show notes. Hey, I say this truly again. It is not, and I'm gonna add this to my list of topics for our next pod. As much as baby boomers, Gen Xers need to help and reach back out, it is not always the common stance or posture. And I can say I've been blessed to have, about as many people as I can hold, about as many fingers as I have, of Black men who are older than me, who are willing to help me. But I also can say of people I've mentored that is not always common. And so I share that to say thank you. Thank you for being willing to share your expertise. Thank you for your passion for the next generation. Thank you for thinking about legacy and not just yourself. Thank you for the work that you're leading and doing. And God bless you. And I'm excited about Black Men. I'm excited about Black Enterprise. I'm excited about having you back on the pod. And man, it's been a great conversation. Thank you, Mr. Edmond.
Listen, I really appreciate you having me on. We've been doing a whole series of these podcast interviews in ahead of the XCEL Summit for Men next month. I just thank you again. You're talking about living corporate. You're talking to the audience that we want to serve, because we want you to thrive corporate, even now, even today. So definitely go to blackenterprise.com, click the events tab, the XCEL Summit for Men 2025. I think there's still codes out there. We can get significant discounts on registration, especially if you're working in corporate America. This event was designed for you to advance. Yeah, you might want to be an entrepreneur. You might be one now, but most of us are working someplace. And most of us are working for a Fortune 1000 company or a company adjacent to that. And so with all due respect to our tradition of supporting Black entrepreneurs, which we've never abandoned, we never will, we're like, no, these are people who need that support. And by the way, when you succeed in corporate America, about 20% of the people who attend XCEL, the XCEL Summit for Men and Women of Power, are entrepreneurs. Because what they're looking for a relationship with friendly faces who might actually take vendors, the call when they say, vendors, right? They're like, no, I need relationships. So Black entrepreneurs need corporate executives with budget and decision-making power at high levels.
It's an ecosystem.
With corporate America. It's an ecosystem. And we realize with Women of Power and now the XCEL Summit that we got to strengthen that ecosystem inside corporate America as much as we're strengthening those people who've decided corporate's not for me. I'm going to start my own company.
Golly. Black Enterprise, XCEL Summit. Excited about it. Till next time, y'all. Love y'all. Peace. Oh, that's wonderful. Okay, Mr.
Living Corporate is a podcast by Living Corporate LLC. Our logo was designed by David Dawkins. Our theme music was produced by Ken Brown. Additional music production by Antoine Franklin for Musical Elevation. Post-production is handled by Jeremy Jackson. Got a topic suggestion? Email us at livingcorporatepodcast@gmail.com. You can find us online on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and living-corporate.com. Thanks for listening. Stay tuned.